Hello and welcome to another Every Tuesday tutorial. In this week's tutorial, we're keeping our holiday greeting series going with project number 2, some watercolor lettering surrounded by winter foliage embellishments. So what you see on screen is exactly what we're going to be creating together. The color palette is free as always. There's a link in the video description, so just tap on that and you can download and install it. We will also be using my paid set of watercolor illustration brushes, and all of the snowflakes are part of my snowflake stamp brush set, so I'll leave a link to both of those in the video description as well. So I'm going to start by creating a brand new canvas that's 1500 pixels by 1500 pixels at 300 dpi. I am working in the display P3 color profile. If you're on an older iPad and don't have access to that color profile, then the default sRGB color profile is perfectly fine. All right, I've got my canvas all ready to go. Let's start by dropping in our background color. So I'm going to tap on my layer palette, tap on background color, and we're going to use this very first color at the end. The next thing we're going to do is add in our hand lettering. So head into the watercolor illustration brush set. We're going to use our heavy paint round brush for the lettering. Come back to your layers palette. Layer 1, we're going to label lettering, and we're going to paint out our lettering with the white color, which is the second one in the color palette. Okay, now we need to center up our lettering, so I'm just going to select it. If you have freeform or uniform selected down here, make sure when you tap on snapping that snapping is selected, so then when you move your lettering around, you'll be able to see those yellow crosshairs appear, and that will show you right where the center of your canvas is. And once you're there, we're all set to go. Now we're going to plan out where all of our embellishments are going to go, so I'm just going to grab black temporarily. So double tap where your black is. We're going to grab our sketching pencil, and I'm going to create a brand new layer and label this one sketch. We're going to plan out where all of these embellishments are going to go. So we're going to have some large elements, and then we're going to have some supporting elements. So I always draw the large elements first because that's where all of the attention is going to go. So I want to make sure I'm putting the attention in the right places first before I add in all the supporting secondary elements. So these are going to be fairly large branches that are going to come into the negative space of our phrase and then branch outward. So I'm going to add a few over here. And I want everything to feel balanced. So if I put all of my weight up here, then it's going to feel off kilter. So I always make sure I have a pretty balanced feeling with where my elements are going. We're going to have one come into this part of our phrase. So even though I have 4 on both sides, they're pointing a little bit differently, and that makes things just a little bit more interesting as well. And then down here, we could have a big branch at the bottom as kind of an underline. I'm going to stick with my theme of poking into the negative space of my letters. So I'm going to continue that, or try to continue that down here. I like how that feels. So these ones are going to have large leaves on them. So I'm just going to signify that really quickly. So now that we have our larger elements, now it's time to plan out where our supporting elements are going to go. So I'm going to have these pine branches also in here. And they're going to have either a branch or 2, and then they're just going to have their little pine needles coming off of them. So these are supporting, so I don't need as many of them. So they're going to be a little more sparse throughout these bunches of elements. Okay, once you have your pine in there, the other supporting element that I want to add in is going to be kind of like a fuzzy looking flower. So it's going to add a little bit of extra contrast because it's going to be white and very soft. And then just to fill in any remaining white space, I'll add in some berries here and there, and that'll give it a pop of red against all the blue and green and white elements that we'll have in here. As we get going and we start putting in all of our elements, if we need to change or adjust anything, we have the freedom to do that, but just make sure you're happy with the general layout of all of your elements first. So I'm going to roll with this one. I'm going to reduce the opacity of it so I can hardly see it and just use this as a guide as we move along. So this is down to like 20%. So we'll start with those larger elements first. So I'm going to create a brand new layer. This one's going to be called Blue Branches. We're going to grab our darkest blue color for this right in the middle. And we're going to also grab our medium paint round brush to paint these in. So these large blue branches, we're going to draw a stem up. And these ones are going to be curved at the top. It's a longer type of leaf. And I'm not going to make these symmetrical on both sides because it'll be a little more interesting, especially for a more dominant element in our layout. Now we can draw in our other branches. So you can see how I've got one leaf that's kind of mixing in with my other large branch. So we'll just make a slight adjustment to that to make sure everything continues to fit well. This one will be a little smaller than that one. Okay, and then our last branch, we're going to make an adjustment. We'll just continue all the way around, so I'll speed up the video. Once you have all of your large blue branches drawn in, the next thing we're going to do is paint in our pine. So I'm going to create a brand new layer, label this one pine. We're going to grab our green color. I'm going to change over to my round liner brush for this. I'm at a 5% size. Draw up your lines and then just attach the pine needles to the ends. We can preview this at any time without our sketch layer by just turning it off. And let's see how that looks. It's looking good so far, so we'll continue on with our other supporting elements. I'm going to turn my sketch layer back on, create a brand new layer, and this one we're going to call White Branches. So for this one, we're going to grab our lightest color again. So I'm going to come back to my sketching pencil. I'm going to reduce the size to 4%. I'm going to draw a line up. And then up at the top, you're going to put a little scribble, and then the scribble is going to get larger as it comes down and kind of fan out. And that'll give the impression that it's a nice soft element where we've got some harder edges elsewhere. Bring this one up a little further. So I'm going to come around and fill those ones in. Okay, the last thing we need to do is add in our berries. So I'm going to create a brand new layer, call this berries. I'm going to grab my darkest pink color first, and I'm going to return back to my medium paint round brush and just drop in some dots in these areas that I gave myself earlier. Grab my light pink color. And now the last thing we need to do is add in our snow. So I'm going to create a brand new layer. This one's going to be labeled Snowflakes. We're going to grab our lightest color and we're going to head into our snow stamps. And once again, this is a free brush set. So I'm going to just grab a few of these. We'll start with the very top one first. And that's a pretty good size. This size is 4%. And I'll just stamp these around. Then I'm going to grab the Snow 3. Let's see what size this is. This one's a little bit larger, which I like, and it's a bit softer. So it's creating some nice contrast between the two flakes. This one is sized at 5%. And I'm going to have some of them crop off the edge to make it seem more realistic. And then we'll put in, our last one will be a little bit smaller. This one we're going to grab our Snowflake 5. And this size is at 4%. And then to just add a little bit more contrast to the snow in the background, we're just going to put in some white dots back there as well. So I'm going to grab my free monoweight brush for this one. And let's see what size. That looks pretty good. Let me bring it a little bit smaller. We're going to come down to 10%. I like using my finger to stamp these ones in because if you use your stylus, it's really easy to end up with a line instead of a dot. But if you just tap the screen with your finger, you get a dot every time. So I'll just fill these in wherever I have gaps here and there. And now let's just make sure our sketch layer is turned off so we can take a look at our final piece. So that's project number 2 in our holiday greeting series. Once again, links to everything mentioned within this tutorial, including the free color palette, the paid watercolor illustration brushes, the free snowflake brushes, and my free monoweight brush are all in the video description. So just tap on there and you can have access to everything. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit the like button, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you can be notified of new tutorials just like this one in the future. For more Procreate tutorials and freebies, head on over to my site, every-tuesday.com. You can also find me over on Instagram. My handle is everytuesday. If you try this out and post it there, I would love it if you tag me. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next week.